Imagine sitting on a treasure and not knowing about it. So I'd like to share the story of how an idea, how an organization came to be. It all starts with this man, my dear friend Ghulam, in late 2015. So Ghulam used to be a navigator, working on board of a big container ship for Stina Shipping Company. And he sailed the world for many, many years. At some point, he had to return to Yangon to look after his two sons, his mother, his sister, and a few other family members. He had some savings from his time as a navigator, and he also started working as a taxi driver to earn some extra income. And so for a few years, he was able to make ends meet. But in late 2015, Ghulam ran out of savings while his mother fell ill and school fees for his two sons were due. And it was to me that he turned for help. Now, it wasn't that I had any track record of helping people avoid debt. In fact, rather the opposite. Up until then, I'd mostly been working on pretty abstract governance issues. But other than giving him the money he needed, an idea for a more sustainable solution did come to mind. So I had always been a big fan of heritage buildings, renovating and moving into an old building when I first arrived in Myanmar 4 years ago. At that point, it wasn't very common yet for foreigners to stay downtown. In fact, it was somewhat discouraged by local authorities, as some of you might remember. As that meant I couldn't find a broker who would show me places, I roamed the streets for many, many days, taking notes of areas and buildings where I wanted to live. And I chatted with people on the sidewalks to find out what was going on inside these buildings and whether I could perhaps stay there. And I remember that people were really surprised that I was interested in staying in these old buildings, rather than in a new, modern condominium. And I also remember that I was really surprised that people didn't seem to realize the beauty of these buildings. And so after days of such wandering around, I found a building where I still live today. And in fact, this man is now my neighbor. So back to my friend Ghulam, who was in financial trouble. He was in financial trouble, but he also had a second apartment next to his own on historic Bogolese Street. He'd been renting it out, but as it was quite run down, he wasn't receiving a lot of money on it. So I suggested to renovate the unit and see if we could increase the rent. So we set out to create a modern design that also kept the old heritage elements. We found the money that he needed to borrow to renovate it. And after the renovation was complete, we found a new tenant. And guess what? The new tenant was willing to pay 4 times more the amount Ghulam had been receiving previously. And so that meant that renovation was paid back within a year and that the family started enjoying a solid monthly income. Now, before we knew it, friends and family members started coming to us, asking us if we could help them do the same. And after some deliberation, Ghulam and I decided to team up, and we started renovating these places. And it was in this process that we started having an important realization. And that is that heritage conservation can be so much more than the dogmatic imperative it often is. One must preserve history. One must preserve colonial history, that is even. What we realized was that heritage conservation can also, first and foremost, improve people's livelihoods and their neighborhoods. Now let me share a little side story. So while we were renovating our 5th property on Lower 27th Street, we noticed a space behind the property. We have been talking about how little public space there was in downtown Yangon and how we would like for there to be more places to be outside and relax. And we noticed this back alley. And I don't know how many of you have noticed the back alleys in downtown Yangon, but they're dirty, right? And full of trash. Well, we probably had one of the dirtiest ones in downtown behind the property. But we thought, given there are so many of these, that it would be really nice to see if we could clean it up and turn it into a space that people could enjoy. So we decided to try it out, and we turned 20 meters of such a trash alley into an alley garden. At first, people thought we were quite crazy, that we were hanging out in this back alley. But when we organized a mural painting workshop for the children from the community during the Yangon My Home Festival, the idea started to pique people's interest. And again, other people and individuals and neighborhoods started coming to us to ask us if we could maybe help them do the same. And we thought we saw a parallel between our heritage conservation work and the Back Alley project. Now let's zoom out a little bit. Yangon is one of the last cities in Asia with its historic city center pretty much still intact. There are over 2,000 historic properties still standing in downtown Yangon. And that puts Yangon right up there with other historic cities like Hanoi, Havana, Bombay, and Calcutta. Overall, the downtown grid is pretty much still as the British planned it about 150 years ago. Now, after years of neglect, many buildings might still structurally be okay, but they no longer provide for safe and healthy living conditions. I'm sure many of you have seen old buildings in downtown Yangon with red plaques that YCDC have put on them, indicating that they will be demolished. Now, because renovation is such an expensive and complex thing to do, in the last years, demolition, followed by the construction of new buildings, such as this one, has become more and more common. There has been a movement to protect heritage, but as in many other places around the world, this movement has largely focused on saving big public buildings, such as the Secretariat or the railway station building. And so far, it has mostly been large institutions that have been involved in saving these big public buildings, not ordinary people. What I'm advocating today is to preserve and reuse smaller heritage landscapes and buildings, and to do so in a bottom-up and citizen-led way. Heritage conservation directly with or even by homeowners, and where possible, in financially viable ways. Because, first of all, wouldn't you agree that it is as much the smaller heritage landscapes and streets and buildings that make the city so unique? Streets and buildings like this one, or this one, or this one. And secondly, more important, when you work on heritage conservation with communities, there's a chance for communities to prosper through caring for something that they already have. To recognize what they already have as assets and unlock the value of these. Because with the growing interest of both residents and visitors, heritage conservation doesn't only need to be about identity or history. It can also be a business case, a social business case of benefit to local families. Now, this is what I call asset-based urban development. And this is exactly what we seek to achieve with the organization called Doh Eain we have since set up. Our home, that means. Now let me say a little bit more about this asset-based urban development, because I've been giving it quite a lot of thought. So as a development professional, I often think about the kind of development approach that I feel can make a real sustainable impact. A development approach that I feel can justify and guide my presence here as a foreigner, mingling in local affairs. And overall, I have come to feel most comfortable with asset-based development. Asset-based development is all about sustainable development of communities based on their own strengths and potentials. Asset-based development identifies resources within communities, which can be natural resources or leadership resources, or in our case, cultural heritage resources. And then it uses these resources to turn them into products or services that can benefit the local community. And when this is done in the right way, not only does it lead to economic benefits, such as jobs or businesses, it also strengthens these assets themselves. Now, all of this is the exact opposite to the needs-based approach. Needs-based approaches are all about what communities don't have. They focus on weaknesses, on gaps, and then they come up with solutions and interventions to fix these gaps. But what often happens in the process is that communities start feeling disempowered, passive recipients of help, rather than people actively in control of their own lives. Now, the active-based approach is beautiful to me because its departure point is wealth, abundance. It helps people realize all the strengths and treasures that are already within their community, and it helps them to use these. And this is what I like about our heritage conservation work. All we are doing is helping them become aware of all the assets that surround them. We help heritage homeowners realize that they're sitting on a treasure. We help people living next to trash alleys realize that these trash alleys can be valuable public space too. And we see a lot of other assets as well. And by then creating concrete financial and social returns, we create tangible incentives for people to keep looking after these assets, after their heritage, after their public space, and ultimately after every unique square meter that forms the city Yangon. Now, of course, I know it's not as easy as simply persuading people to keep their heritage homes or to sweep their back alleys. There's a lot of other things that would need to be done too, things that are beyond us. A key one that I want to single out is insecure property ownership. I really hope that this will be an issue that will be tackled in the years to come. The government must give property owners as well as landowners a chance to build and capitalize on what they have. There are many other things the government could do too. If you take a look around the world, for example in Tanzania, Zanzibar, it's the government itself that undertakes cost-benefit analyses of the value of heritage conservation. In Havana, the government lets heritage homeowners rent out rooms in their apartments, which responds to touristic demand, directly benefits families, and avoids the need to have to build big hotels. And in Hong Kong, where land is so expensive, the government compensates heritage homeowners for giving up the right to redevelop. Let's go back to my friend Gulam. Gulam is now the proud owner of a heritage apartment and a big heritage advocate. He doesn't throw trash into the back alley anymore, and he reprimands his neighbors when they do that. He and his neighbors have realized that looking after their heritage and looking after their public space can directly improve their lives and their neighborhoods. I wanted to end with a vision, or maybe it's a request. And that is for us to stop looking at Yangon as a place of problems. To stop focusing on everything that might be difficult here, such as traffic or bad sewerage, but instead to start looking at Yangon as a place of opportunities, to start focusing on everything that makes this city so special, so unique, on all the assets that we can further develop. I think this city is amazing. Let's invest and look after it. Thank you.